I was born to hate. Hate is in my blood. I'm a professional hater, not at the same levels of Reverse Flash or Lex Luthor, but every time I see a character that I hate so much, I will not hold back in telling the world why I hate said character. I will not hold back in screaming to the world and letting the world know that this character needs to be hated for a good or a bad reason. Now, some of these characters I genuinely hate, and there are no redeeming qualities to these characters, like the main character of Star Wars Acolyte. Osha was so ass that it made me turn off the TV. Or like Captain Carter in the What If series. You already know how much I hate Captain Carter, so I'm not gonna go into her character. But there are some certain characters that you hate so much that it makes you love these characters. There are certain characters that every time you see them on TV, you hate them because they do the most fucked up shit. But you have to remember that these characters are great. You have to see the story for what it is, and if the story is making you hate these characters to that extent, then that story is doing a great job. And these characters are the Penguin from the Penguin series and Walter White from Breaking Bad, because those two characters, I hate them in the best way possible. But it seems that James Gunn has added to that category of creating a character that you hate so much, but you ended up liking because of what happens after the actions that this character did. Because in Creature Commandos episode 6, we see a character that is introduced, but we actually saw this character be introduced in the trailers and in some promotional scenes, and that character is Rupert Thorne. Now, his screen time is very little in this episode, but the little screen time that he had made me really hate this character so much. But at the end, it also made me thank this character for being existent, because it birthed the origin of Dr. Phosphorus in this series, in this universe. And man, the origin of Dr. Phosphorus is so heartbreaking. It's so heart-wrenching. It will make you want to cry. It will make you want to leap into the TV, find Rupert Thorne, beat his ass, and do the exact same thing that Dr. Phosphorus did to him. So in my honest opinion, I think James Gunn did an effective job in making you hate Rupert Thorne so much. And you're probably wondering, why do you hate Rupert Thorne so much? What could he have possibly done that would make you despise him so much? How is he near the same concept as being Satan's greatest soldier? Well, I'm gonna tell you that right now, because the episode 6 of Creature Commandos, it continues off of episode 5, because remember, the team, Bride, Dr. Phosphorus, Nina Mazursky, and Weasel are now all on the run. They are fugitives of Pokolistan because their attempt of trying to kill Alana failed. So when that failed, they had to scatter, they had to separate each other, and they had to go on their own paths to see if they can hide, to see if they can evade capture. Because Princess Alana, in the beginning of this episode, she tells her guards that she wants the Creature Commandos dead. She wants them to not only capture them, but to slaughter the entire group. So as the members of the Creature Commandos had to separate in order to evade capture from the Pokolistan guards and forces, we see that the Bride, she's making her way through this alleyway, and at first she's alone, but she eventually bumps into Nina Mazursky, and simultaneously when they bump into each other, the Bride and Nina Mazursky hastily make a decision to go inside this whorehouse, because the guards, they notice some noises at that location. So when they enter the whorehouse, the Bride, she now uses intimidation and fear as a tactic of forcing the owner of the whorehouse to help them not be captured by the guards, because the guards, they now knock on the door. And when the Bride, she has a gun to the owner of the whorehouse, she instructs the owner of the whorehouse to tell another worker of the whorehouse to go to the door and to act like nobody came in, to act like no two fugitives walked inside, and the guards, they believe it, so they leave. I like the dynamic that James Gunn put inside this whorehouse scene, because we see that the bride, she is still a rash, disrespectful person, that her only motive is to do the job that was instructed by her from Amanda Waller, and that is to kill the Princess Alana. But we see that Nina Mazursky contrasts the bride's attitude and personality, because Nina Mazursky, she is very polite, she's very nice, and she's very respectful. So when the bride and the owner of the whorehouse, they are kind of arguing with each other, because the owner of the whorehouse is challenging the bride's motives and challenging the bride's line of work, because the bride, she is selling her body so that she can kill people. She is selling her soul so that she can basically use herself as a force of weapon, while the whores in the whorehouses, they are selling their soul so that they can please people. So we eventually see that dynamic get challenged later in the episode. But let me go onto the other characters of the creature commandos, because we see that Dr. Phosphorus, he is hiding right now. He is trying to go through neighborhoods to evade capture, so then he eventually goes inside this neighborhood. But before we see him go inside this house, we see the backstory of Dr. Phosphorus, and we see the reason why I hate Rupert Thorne in this series. We see the big weirdo himself, Rupert Thorne. So Dr. Phosphorus, his name is Alex Sartorius, and he, at first, before he became Dr. Phosphorus, he was a scientist that he was trying to find the cure for cancer, so that he can not only help his wife, but he can basically get justice of some sort for his dad, because his dad died of cancer, and one of the parents of the wife died as well from cancer. So that's a noble reason to try to find a cure for one of the most deadliest diseases in history. But the thing about this is that Alex, aka Dr. Phosphorus, he is trying to find the cure, but he is being funded by criminals. He's being funded by the mob, ran by Rupert Thorne. So obviously this is a recipe for disaster. So my expectations going into these scenes were so low, but I did not think that it would get lower once I saw what would happen, because we see that obviously when you are trying to fund something and you are being funded by a gang, there are no happy endings. But Rupert Thorne proves to be such an asshole, such an evil person in this series, that just because Dr. Phosphorus, he purposely did not let his wife put the real actual documents and send it to Rupert Thorne, because Rupert, he's trying to use the evidence and the cure so that he can trade it with his other illegal partners, and they will basically use this cure to fund themselves to get more money. When Rupert Thorne gets word of that, he does the unthinkable, man. He kills Dr. Phosphorus's wife, and he kills the daughter as well. Then when Rupert Thorne brings Dr. Phosphorus to the crime scene, to the bodies, he frames Dr. Phosphorus for their murders. He has his men hold Dr. Phosphorus down. He has his men grab Dr. Phosphorus's arms and use his arms and hands to basically incriminate himself, to put all of his fingertips on the bodies, on the blood, and they give him a big kitchen knife, so that they basically are trying to frame that Dr. Phosphorus killed his family, killed his wife and his daughter. And that was crazy and sick. But that's not the only thing Rupert Thorne did to Dr. Phosphorus. Rupert Thorne, he dragged Dr. Phosphorus to this van, and when they went inside this van, they're trying to drive Dr. Phosphorus to a certain location. At first, Dr. Phosphorus escapes the van, but they ended up beating him up. They not ended up dragging him back into the van, and the place they drove him to was this fusion chamber. That this fusion chamber, if you get inside this chamber, it will kill you because of the radiation poisoning inside this fusion chamber. So when they now brought Dr. Phosphorus in the chamber, Dr. Phosphorus, he was pleading with Rupert Thorne, please don't do this, please, please. He was pleading for his life, and he admits that yes, his wife was the one that did not want to show Rupert Thorne the real evidence of the cure for cancer. But Rupert Thorne, he was not hearing any of it. He already had the evidence to get a lot of money because of this cure. So Rupert Thorne, he has his men to throw Dr. Phosphorus in that fusion chamber, hoping to kill Dr. Phosphorus. Not only is he framing Dr. Phosphorus for the deaths of his family, he is trying to make it see as if that Dr. Phosphorus also committed suicide by trying to do radiation poisoning, and it almost worked. Dr. Phosphorus nearly died, and it was fucked up hearing that one of Rupert Thorne's henchmen said, "I hope you see your wife soon." That shit was fucked up. And Rupert Thorne right now, he's public enemy number one, because in this flashback, as it continues throughout the episode, we see that Dr. Phosphorus, he did not die. He got mutated in this fusion chamber. He got mutated with the radiation poisoning, and he basically becomes this walking atomic skeleton that everything he touches, it turns to acid. So Dr. Phosphorus, he is naked. He is basically almost dead. He's clinging to the last little inch of life, but he is having a revenge tour to kill Rupert Thorne, and that's exactly what he does. And when I saw that, I could not only help but clap, but I was basically screaming at my TV, rooting for Dr. Phosphorus to kill Rupert Thorne, because Rupert Thorne is a sick, sadistic motherfucker in this show. So Rupert Thorne eventually gets killed when, you know, Rupert Thorne, he was basically mocking Dr. Phosphorus for the love of his family. So it was kind of poetic seeing Dr. Phosphorus kill Rupert Thorne in front of Rupert Thorne's family. And we see that Rupert Thorne is actually a loving dad. So Rupert Thorne, he was a very hypocritical man as a crime mob, because how are you gonna mock Dr. Phosphorus' situation, and how are you gonna basically mock his entire dead family? So I like how James Gunn wrote that. And when Dr. Phosphorus kills Rupert Thorne, he takes control of Rupert Thorne's entire organization. He takes control of his men. He takes control of his money, of his drugs, of his weapons. So this causes Dr. Phosphorus to turn evil and to turn into a supervillain. But I'll get to the surprise later. Let me go back to the bride and Nina Mazursky. So we see the bride and Nina Mazursky, they are still at the whorehouse, and the bride, we are seeing her still being combative with the owner of the whorehouse. But we see the dynamic of how the bride is selling her body for killing and how the whores are selling their bodies for pleasure. We see that get challenged when these two drunk men, they come inside the bar and they forcefully grab one of the whores and they take the whore upstairs. So the bride now tells the owner of the whorehouse, "See, so is this life so good? Is this life of pleasing men like this so good?" So I kind of like that they touch upon that. But what I didn't like, and this is not anything bad about the writing, it's just two weirdo rapists. These two weirdo rapists are the same two men that walked in because they tried to force themselves on this lady and they were about to rape this lady. So when that happened, I was like, no, these niggas are disgusting. They gotta be killed. And it's good. My wish was answered, because we see that the owner of the whorehouse tried to stop the rape, but she nearly died. And when she was about to die, we see that Nina Mazursky now comes with a glass bottle and smashes it up inside the head of one of the rapists. And the disgusting rapist, we see that he's a metahuman. James Gunn has already stated this, that in the DCU, metahumans are already a thing, and they are kind of becoming a problem. They are kind of becoming not a pandemic or not a crisis or not something that will be very crazy, but they are starting to become more ruthless and more evil. And a lot of these new metahumans are trying to use their power for evil. Like this is happening right now. This guy is trying to use his power to rape this girl. So it's good that the bride and Nina Mazursky, they stopped this. But the metahuman, he's kind of powerful. He has electric powers and he almost beats up the bride, but the bride, man, she did not sell any of his next hits. She was beating his ass and she was basically destroying him. It was good seeing a rapist get his ass beat. So the bride now rips his arm and rips his heart and just basically destroys his heart. So that was good, and they ended up eventually leaving that whorehouse to go to the castle where Princess Alana is at. And as they're going to that castle, they see that the Weasel is also going to the castle as well, and Dr. Phosphorus. But back to Dr. Phosphorus. Dr. Phosphorus, he's at this house basically playing with this kid because this kid reminds him of his dead daughter that died due to Rupert Thorne. So when I saw that, that kind of put a tear in my eyes because damn, he is just basically reminiscing about his dead daughter. But since now in the past, in the flashback, Dr. Phosphorus, he is a criminal. He is a new big bad of Gotham. We see a cameo that, man, that shit was peak, even if it was for only 1 second. And that cameo is Batman, is the first look of DCU Batman. Now, it's only a silhouette because we don't see any specific details of the suit, but we actually see that Batman, he is going to be dealing with fantastical villains, and that brought a big smile on my face, ear to ear grin, because I want a fantastical Batman to fight the likes of Clayface, Solomon Grundy, Killer Croc, Mr. Freeze, all of these crazy villains. So I like seeing that. But we now eventually go back to the present, and we now see Dr. Phosphorus has caught up with the gang. He has caught up with Weasel, Nina Mazursky, and the bride, and now they're on their way to Princess Alana's castle in Pocolistan. So we'll have to see in the final episode how this will end. But man, James Gunn has done it again. This entire season has not missed. All of the episodes in this entire season have been bangers after bangers after bangers. So I'm pretty sure that the season finale will be a banger as well. But man, y'all need to watch Creature Commandos. It's a very great show, and this episode really made me hate Rupert Thorne because he is a dickhead. He didn't have to do that to Dr. Phosphorus, but I thank him that he did that because Dr. Phosphorus is cool as fuck. As the end of the video, I'm out. Peace.